Welcome all, it's Another here. As was just said, I'm Director of Policy and Advocacy here at the VTA. This is the first of what we hope will be many similar sessions to showcase and highlight and celebrate the large levels of applied research and innovation in the TAFE sector. Before I took on this role, I was a Senior Advisor and Strategic Advisor to the DBC Research at Victorian University. When I came into the TAFE sector, I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of applied research activity that is going on and by the passion of vet practitioners for applied research and innovation. So when the opportunity came up to demonstrate, to celebrate the activities that are going on, we jumped at it here at the VTA. This is one of many things that we're doing to try to raise the profile of applied research and to build on what is strong, but still, we would all agree, probably fledgling activity, applied research activity. Other things we're doing is we're establishing a community of practice for research and applied research and innovation. We've got a vet practitioners research network, which I would highly recommend all visiting, joining, and we've also got a research and advocacy committee, which has a broad remit for the development of applied research and for research generally and innovation in the sector. Now, on to today's webinar. I'm very pleased to introduce Lana Hansons and Justine Rofe. I first met Justine last year when she presented at what turned out to be probably the largest, or one of the largest Oktoberfest events, which similarly celebrated applied research and innovation. So when Justine and Lana presented me with this topic, I thought this would be a great topic for a webinar and had to be shared to the broader network. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Lana and Justine for what I'm sure will be a really fascinating and challenging and insightful presentation. So over to you.
Thank you very, very much and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our very first webinar. My name is Lana Hansons. I work here at Wodonga TAFE. I'm a VCAL teacher. For those of you that don't know what VCAL is, it's a program, an applied learning program for young people who are completing their secondary education studies. My background is as a social worker originally, but proud now to be in the teaching sector.
And equally welcoming to everyone. I'm Justine Rofe. I work alongside Lana in another department though, but we will be presenting today on a project that we worked together on a couple of years ago. I look after all of our higher education, our university partnerships, pathways, and vet in schools and international and the student success and retention project. So quite a diverse role, but we're very excited to be here today to share our learning and our future plans for student retention, student success and retention using an applied learning methodology or applied research methodology.
So thank you again for joining us. As Arnaldo said, please pop any questions into the sidebar there and we're going to answer those at the end. If you've got any questions, pop them in there. We'll address them as quickly as we can. So we'll just jump in. We're on a short time frame, so we'll jump into the presentation now. First of all, I guess to introduce the research and how the research was established and how we came up with the Student Success and Retention Project. Wodonga TAFE, like many institutes, recognised that retaining students needed to be a bigger focus for us. We were engaging students. We weren't, however, keeping them all, and we recognised that student attrition is linked to financial stability these days, and I guess we wanted to ensure that we were retaining as many students as we could within our programs. The way that we went about the research, there's 5 different boxes on your screen now that I'll just run through quickly. We run an early exit survey with students who had already withdrawn from our programs throughout the year, and we asked them a bunch of questions about what led to their withdrawal and collated some data, which I'll go through as the presentation goes. We also did a staff consultation, or a number of staff consultations within our own institute, And I guess we wanted to look at, from a teacher's perspective, what early exit looked like from within their classrooms and what they were seeing as a pattern for student attrition. We then went a little bit deeper and started looking at the data, I guess, particularly the big data, the learning analytics trial. We focused there on the engagement of our students on Moodle and how we were ensuring that we could retain students in the online world, which adds another complexity of student retention, and I'm going to delve deeper into that as we go as well. We looked at our own attrition data analysis, particularly students who had already withdrawn from our courses throughout that year, and we looked at what the courses were that they were withdrawing from, the course level, the units, the timing of their withdrawal, and we were starting to create a picture about student attrition for our institute. And finally, the last step in that process was some student forums with current students who hadn't withdrawn, students who were still in our classes, and we sort of started to flip the language, I guess, from a negative space, from a student attrition, student early exit, withdrawal sort of phase, to a student success phase of what keeps you coming, what keeps you engaged, what motivates you. And we sort of started to paint a picture, I guess, of the steps that were needed to create a successful student environment for our learners. That was how the data was collected and how the research project came about. One of the initial questions we asked ourselves in this process was, do we actually know what happens to a student after they make an inquiry with our institute? When they ring up and they say, I'm interested in doing Certificate 4 in whatever course, let's pick community services as an example, do we actually know what happens to that student once that phone call or that initial inquiry is made? We started, based on the data we collected, we started to get a picture, and we called that the student life cycle. So throughout the process of the research, we were able to get a really good indication of what was happening to students after they made that inquiry, and also where the risky parts, or the hot spots we called them, for attrition were happening. And I'll run you through that student life cycle now. So you can see at the top of your screen is the inquiry stage. We've labelled that red as in a high risk of attrition. When a student makes an inquiry, if for some reason that inquiry isn't handled correctly, or they're not able to access the information that they need on their course requirement, it's a high risk that they're not going to continue with that enrolment. Then we started to map what happens following that inquiry. So the next stage in that lifestyle is assessing their eligibility, and we all know what that looks like these days in terms of whether they're government funded or a fee-for-service type student. Then a student will hit the pre-training process, and sometimes those two might actually even happen simultaneously. But what we noticed with the data that we were collecting is that pre-training process for our institute was also another hotspot for attrition. And often that was due to literacy and numeracy issues. It could have also been sort of issues with course eligibility or course requirements. So we noticed that the pre-training process for our institute wasn't as clear as it could have been, and we certainly put a lot of work into making sure that we were making that a seamless process for students. Following that, we go through our selection and enrolment stage of the student life cycle, and then finally, and we're nearly at the bottom now of the student life cycle, you can see is where we start our course, and that's our orientation stage, right through to course commencement, the training, the assessment, and the placement. And again, we've marked those as hotspots for risk of attrition. Particularly, our data was showing that that was highly likely to happen within the first 4 weeks of a course starting. So a lot of our dropout, our early exit was happening not long after commencement of a course. So using that student life cycle as a model, I guess we're able to provide or look at the support provision that we were providing as an institute around those critical times that were linked to early exit of students, and we were able to really target courses that had high non-completion rates and really up and extend the supports that were offered during those critical periods. So you can see on that life cycle in the middle there are our 4 sort of key areas, and we call them the attract phase, the engage phase, the retain phase, and then the transition phase. And that transition phase was all about our pathways for our students and where they were heading to post-course completion. We were also able to look at who was at risk of early exiting through the data we were collecting. So again, using big data and learning analytics software, combined with our student surveys and our staff consultations and the other methods of collecting data, we're able to profile the students who are at risk of exiting early. So I'll just run you through what we found, in particular our Cert 4 courses and our foundation level courses. And those were the Cert 2 and below level courses. And we had a close eye, or a watch closely on diploma there. This was in the particular year that we were collecting this data. We noticed that females were more likely to withdraw than males, and often through our student surveys, our females who were exiting courses often linked that to family commitments, caring for children, that sort of thing. We were able to see that students who had unit failure throughout the year were more likely a risk of exiting early from a course. So I commenced my course, I failed a unit within the first semester, and I've just been hanging in there by the skin of my teeth for the rest of the year, and unfortunately have exited as a result of that unit failure. Probably no surprise that our under 25s, our glorious young people, were a much higher risk of exiting early. But similarly, that age range of 36 to 45s were the other age group that were likely or higher risk of exit early. And again, that was linked to family commitments and balancing work and study with home life. The final thing for profiling of our students were our late withdrawals. And as I mentioned earlier, we noticed that if students were not withdrawing within the first 4 weeks of course, our other spike in withdrawals were happening really late in the year. Students who were struggling throughout the year and thinking that they would get back on top of things, and unfortunately come late in semester 2, things had gotten on top of them and they decided to withdraw. So first 4 weeks of class and then again later in the year, that's what we were finding with our data. I've been talking about learning analytics a lot and how we used learning analytics to collect a lot of this data, and I'll just run you through a little bit of that now. We used a program called Jasper Soft, which you can see to the right of your screen there. It's a learning analytics program that we pointed at Moodle. And essentially Jasper Soft was able to pull out all of this really useful data around student attrition and student engagement within the online world, which we thought was a really important way of collecting data. What we were looking at particularly was the timeliness of engagement that a student engages with a Moodle unit. For example, if I release a unit on a Monday for a student, if that student doesn't access that Moodle unit for 2 weeks, for example, are they a higher risk of non-completion of that unit? The other thing that we were looking at was the frequency of their engagement. So again, if I release a unit on a Monday, how often does a student engage with that unit, and is that indicative of student success or unit completion within that particular unit? We run that trial against 3 main cohorts. Again, cohorts that use the online world fairly regularly with their studies, and were able, and also had often high non-completion within certain units. So this big data, as listed on your screen, it was able to help us develop or analyse patterns of attrition within the online world and the performance and engagement of our students. And as you can see there in point 3, I've also listed sometimes over-engagement. And that was interesting to look at students who were really active and really over-engaging with a unit, and does that indicate success? And often we found that actually no, it doesn't. Maybe some students were logging on and then going and making a cuppa and disappearing for an hour and racking up hours and hours worth of engagement online, but that actually had no indication of success in that particular unit. Using data analytics, we're able to really help with profiling of students in the online world and look at that early indication of students at risk of withdrawal or of non-completion or non-success in the online world. The reports that we're able to pull from Jaspersoft were hugely beneficial for us, and we're really able to help not only students but teachers with managing the engagement of their students in Moodle. One of the recommendations that we made based on all of the things that we learnt thus far in the research was using peer-assisted study or sessions or peer-led learning as a real key strategy for retaining students. So as a lot of you would know, peer-led learning is a model that's used very successfully in the higher education world. It's not used so much within the vocational sector, but it's definitely a tool and a model that could be used to help with retention of students. So we've been really working hard on developing a model to be able to use peer-led learning as a strategy for student success. And you know, through using students to help students with that focus on how to learn and integrating that with their course content, i.e. the what to learn. So we'd be using that particularly with units with high attrition or with high non-completion rate. And we would be able to evaluate it through not only just the attendance at the peer-led learning sessions, but also the unit completion rates. So if we pick a unit with a high non-completion rate and we throw in some peer-assisted learning over a period of time, we should be able to track whether that is having an impact on our students in a successful way with unit completion rates. Finally, we were able to develop some principles of student success, and these were our 7 keys, and I guess like the 7 wonders of the world and other things, these were our 7 main keys of student success for our institute based on the research that we conducted. What we established is that retention is a collective responsibility of all staff, and if you have a look at the student life cycle and we have a look at remembering that right from the inquiry stage through to the transition graduation stage, there's a number of different departments and staff that come into contact with the student, and that retention is really that institute responsibility. We established that preparedness for study is integral to student success, and as I mentioned earlier, we put a huge focus on our pre-training process as a link to preparedness for study. So let's not enrol students into courses that they simply aren't ready to do. We established that students need to be actively engaged in both the formal and the informal systems, and they were both academic and social. So we talked to students about what keeps them coming back to Wodonga TAFE, and often they mention things to us about the social interactions that they had while they were on our campus and how much they enjoyed that, as well as their process of learning, that the social interactions and the social systems that they engage with were equally important. We noticed that early identification of students at risk supports success, and there's probably nothing surprising in there, but the earlier that we can identify a student that is struggling, the quicker we can provide support and get them back on track. Feedback was something that continually come up through the consultations and the research, and how students, you know, really required feedback to measure their personal success. You know, often they knew they were completing assessments, but they often weren't sure how they were tracking at a personal level, and that was something that was really quite surprising to us, and certainly something that we considered to be an important principle. And similarly, teachers require feedback as well. You know, those unit and course delivery questionnaires or surveys that we do at the end of each of our courses really should shape the way that we deliver and assess in the future, and that teachers really require that feedback from their students about their own delivery style and their own progress. And finally, and you've heard me talk today a lot about data, we recognise the importance that student success should be underpinned by qualitative, quantitative and analytical data. We all, as teachers, get in front of our class, we know how our class is tracking, but maybe at an institute level or a greater level, we're not quite sure how we're going with maintaining, retaining and ensuring student success. So they were the principles that we developed and are actively working towards now. I do have some data to show you a little bit later in the presentation for those of you that do love data as much as I do. But for now, I'm going to hand you over to Justine, who's going to run through how we're using this model and moving it into 2018 and how our institute is putting that focus on student success.
Okay, so picking up from where Lana left off, we certainly had a lot of fun with this project. We learnt a lot along the way, and so much so that as an institute, we have decided to continue on building on what we've already learnt and developing, I suppose, phase 2 of the student success initiative, or student success and retention, in 2018. So, as I said, picking up from where Lana and I, or mostly Lana, left off, I can't take much credit, but these are the objectives that we have outlined that have been board endorsed, and we're hoping to kick off early next year. So to give you a bit of a context about Wodonga, if you're not sure or no one's been up here, we do operate in a relatively thin market. We are a regional TAFE. We also suffer particularly low tertiary participation rates. So for us, it's very important to retain students once we have them. Sort of comes back to your old marketing principles that if it's far cheaper to retain a prospective customer or retain a customer than attract a new one. So we know we need to put in some work with our students. We also acknowledge that there's a strong correlation between education, levels of productivity and labour force participation in our region. So this project plays a large role in assisting our students who are currently enrolled with us complete their qualifications and go on to be productive citizens in the local community. Also to position ourselves as the provider of choice. So we're hoping that through this work we'll be able to promote and position ourselves as the TAFE provider of choice, or the RTO of choice, in our region. So we do have TAFE New South Wales sitting on the other side of the border. There's 2 universities, and we've also got a myriad of private RTOs as well. So investing in our students is key to their success. So you'll see there's a number of objectives, and these are woven throughout the proposal. So to develop and pilot targeted student success services, and Lana touched on one of those in regards to the peer learning activities or services. We would like to foster a proactive student-centred culture, ensure strategic, proactive and ongoing communication amongst all stakeholders, ensure the use of reliable and valid retention and success data, so building on what Lana was able to accomplish using Jaspersoft. Build workforce capability improvements. So Lana did a lot of consultation around the campus to raise the student life cycle and bring that to the forefront of people's minds. We still need to do some work around that, and the project will also build in some staff learning and development activities. So our teachers and our frontline staff who are dealing with prospective and current students understand the student life cycle better and the critical touch points or the risks that are along the continuum. We also would like to move student success and retention into business as usual in 2020. Okay, so you can imagine there's lots of benefits for us. Let's just go on. Sorry, I've missed a slide. The Student Success Project. So what does it look like? Okay, so using this in an applied research project methodology, we will return to the literature, see if anything else has emerged in the last 2 years that we need to be mindful of or take notice of. You certainly hear in the university sector at the moment there's a lot of attention around retention, so it's not a new idea, but we want to capitalise on the knowledge that's already there. And to quote Arnaldo, I'll just pinch his quote that he so kindly passed on to me about applied research and a definition. So applied research is an investigation towards acquiring new knowledge for a specific purpose, practical aim or objective. So with this in mind, we'll be asking practical questions that we'll be answering throughout the 2-year project that tests the service provision that we're providing, we'll be providing against student attrition rates, So firstly, we need to identify, well, what does student success look like? We know what it looks like to us, but what does it look like to a student? We need to recruit appropriate staffing, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how we're going to staff this project shortly. Establish some KPIs and measures of success, knowing full well that we might just be establishing benchmarks during this 2-year project and having firm KPIs come in at the conclusion of the 2-year period to take this service forward into the business as usual model. We will still be using the learning analytics software, the student early exit evaluations and surveys. We want to test the student life cycle against our level of service provision and the different types of services we're going to pilot throughout this stage. We're going to have evaluation woven throughout all levels of the student life cycle. And finally, report the findings and share the learning across the Victorian TAFE network. Okay, so how are we going to staff the project? We will have a staff team leader who will take over the project for the 2-year period, be responsible for the project. We will have student success officers. So all these students or these employment opportunities are going to come from our existing students, knowing full well that we only get to retain students for 18 months to 2 years at the most with a diploma or an advanced diploma. So we're going to target those students that are sitting perhaps at the year 2 of their degree, and they will apply for a position. So the student success officers will support the team leader. They'll look at running that, they'll facilitating the social aspect of holistic support and encouraging students to feel welcome and trusted and part of the institution while they're with us. They will act as the conduit if we need information to make decisions at the higher level. So they will be responsible for us seeking advice from our current students when we've got decisions to be made. We've also got the PASS, so the assisted study sessions or the peer assisted study sessions, where once again the senior students will be assisting our current, beginning students in their course, and it might be, as Lana alluded to, one of the units that has a high level of attrition. So if I take, for example, the Diploma of Nursing, a lot of our students study with medications calculations. So having to get 100% in your medication calculation to pass that unit and succeed in your course. So it might be that the Year 2 students are assisting the Year 1 students in finishing or achieving during that unit. We'll also have peer learning advisors. Now, we are hoping to employ peer learning advisors from the cohort of students that have successfully made the transition from here to university. So we virtually share a large plot of land with La Trobe University, and we do have a lot of our students transition from TAFE to La Trobe University. So we'd be seeking to employ more senior students. Once again, if we think of the nursing students, they've got a 3-year degree at La Trobe. We'll be seeking to engage them as peer learning advisors to assist our Diploma of Nursing students. We think that'll also assist with transition support. So students who are thinking of continuing on to university often have a lot of questions and are unsure, not sure if they'll be able to cope, think it's going to be too hard. So we're hoping that the peer learning advisors will also facilitate that transition process as well. So all of these staff will sit in a high traffic area yes, they are paid positions, Christine. They will sit in a high traffic area, be highly visible to students and promoted amongst the student body and the staff body as well. So we haven't done this before. As I said, this is typically a university level of service provision. So we've got some things to learn. We do know that the time constraints, only having students for a couple of years at most, will impact the success of the student employment, but we really want to be able to provide students with an opportunity to gain valuable working experience as well. So that's what we plan to do in terms of resourcing. Okay, so the benefits of this are many, and I really did struggle to only list quite a few here for you. Some of the main benefits obviously is meeting the aim of positively impacting tertiary participation rates, supporting students and staff throughout the learning life cycle. So we want to be able to run a number of staff learning and professional development activities throughout the project. So staff are well versed in those attrition hotspots and also equipped to respond to students at risk. Or not even respond, but actually identify. So the student success team can come in and assist that student get back on track. Noting, of course, that all attrition is not necessarily bad attrition. Student employment is a great outcome. Through the employment of students, we anticipate that we will have an increased collection of market intelligence, so we will hear directly from our students. Now, this could inform future marketing strategies, but it'll also inform the model moving forward and the levels of service and the types of service provision that we offer throughout the student life cycle. We'll have a greater understanding of the student decision-making hierarchy before they come to enrol. We'll also have understanding about a little bit more about how they experience the life cycle as they move through from that initial contact with us through to graduation and beyond. We'll identify hotspots for attrition. So continuing to work on Lana's fabulous work, we'll be able to refine that further. We'll be able to benchmark activities to establish KPIs when the project moves beyond a project and moves into business as usual. The learning analytics model will be trialled over a larger scale. So next year we're anticipating trialling this model over 4 distinct cohorts of students that are yet to be identified, and the following year we'd like to move it into business as usual, knowing full well that students who are our apprentices and trainees are a different kettle of fish, and the model will have to vary. Lana will talk a little bit more about the apprentice and trainee specifics as well, because we did find that they were quite a distinct group that required a different approach to the other students. Another benefit by employing students, you've got that peer-to-peer conversations. We anticipate that we'll have an increase. We'll be able to respond a lot quicker to students who are thinking about withdrawing or we've identified as being most at risk of withdrawal, and if we can respond in a timely manner and offer the correct supports for the students, we hope that we're able to support them to see them through to graduation. We'll have improved visibility into student satisfaction. We'll have a lot of information to be able to build on our institute's long-term viability and ongoing operations. We'd like to use this to build our reputation, as I mentioned previously, as a provider of choice, and through obviously retaining our students, our financial position in the market will be improved as well. So that is where, and yes, Sharon nailed it, thank you. We're moving from a deficit model where students are no longer used as a problem. As Lana alluded to, we've flipped the terminology on the head and talking in a proactive way about student success, not as intervention or as attrition, but when we're talking with students, being very mindful of the language that we are using, which we feel will work well.
We've got just 3 slides of data to show you, so please stick around and have a look at the following 3 slides. It'll just give you a bit of an indication of how we collected our data, and I'll just provide some final thoughts on the research and how it all come about. So any questions? Yeah, we're just going to have a quick flick through the scroll here and the chat, and just have a quick look at any questions that you might have. So now's the time to post them if you do have questions so far on the research on how Wodonga TAFE is moving forward into 2018 with the Student Success Project. We really value your positive comments there. We're really fond of this project as well, and we do think that we are developing a proactive response to student success rather than watching our students exit early from our courses and then scratching our heads wondering why that's happening. So we like to think that we are in an innovative space here for vocational ed, and we're very happy to take on any questions or comments that you might have.
Marianne, did it take long to get buy-in to fund this? No, it didn't take long. It made perfect sense to our board. There has been a delay. It's just around timing, I suppose. So when we initially conducted the research, it was in 2015. So it hasn't been the Institute's lack of not wanting to proceed, but just more about the timing.
Sue, thank you for asking about being keen to hear more about the findings for apprentices and trainees. I will jump into that very, very shortly, particularly with one of the graphs I've got to show you about student attrition. So hang around for that, please. Were we able to gain information and experience from the university using something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we've got La Trobe just next door, and they employ a number of peer learning advisors and have quite a number of students that are employed to undertake different student support services or activities. So we were able to have a chat to them about what worked and what didn't work. And Lana, we sent Lana to the PASS conference in Melbourne, which was highly informative as well. So the team leader who takes on this role will undergo PASS training. The University of Wollongong facilitates that for the university sector. But what they are finding is some interest from the TAFE sector as well, which was absolutely fantastic to hear. So we will be taking learnings, continue to take learnings from those who have already offered similar student services.
Any other questions we've missed there, Justine?
I think we've answered most. Them all. Thank you, Malcolm.
All right, let's have a look at some of this data. As I said, there's just 3 slides, so I won't bore you too much. Oh, here we go. Okay, so as I mentioned before, probably of no surprise to you that this was looking at particularly our withdrawals by semester. So you can see that semester 1, there is a number of withdrawals there, sitting just above 400 for us in that particular semester of 2015. And you can see when we jump to second semester that attrition rate, that exit, really excelled in the second semester. And I guess that got us thinking about what are the risk factors here for a student? We know that if a student engages with a course, within the first 4 weeks, they're going to decide whether that course is a match or that course meets their expectations of what they thought they were going to receive. For some students, that simply isn't the case, and they withdraw. What this data doesn't capture maybe is those who withdrew from one course in first semester and enrolled in a different course. So we need to recognise that this doesn't actually capture that data at that stage. But I guess it got us thinking about those protective factors and those risk factors, and that's a term used commonly in the social work sector, where we look at risk and protective factors for a client, and we sort of adapted that model a little bit maybe and looked at it from an educational perspective. So particularly, we moved away from thinking we have a training package of Certificate 4 in Community Services. Does that student match our training package? And we started looking more deeper at the risk factors for a student, and they were particularly around poor attendance, so tracking attendance, their inability maybe to balance study with other commitments in their life, and one of the key ones was low career or educational aspirations. And we started talking about aspirations a lot in this process. Where do we actually capture data on the aspirations of our students when they enroll or engage with our courses? And how important is that for us? Now, as an institute, we would say, do we need to know the aspirations of our students if we are enrolling and delivering education? But from the student's perspective, it's highly important that their teacher knows their aspirations and where they're heading and planning to move with that course once they have completed. So flipping that again from a deficit to a more positive model, we started talking about success factors. So these were the things that we think our students need that are beyond the realms of just my pre-training review says I'm qualified or competent to do this course. And we started looking at those success factors. They were things like, of course, preparedness for study was one of them. And it moved into things like good time management skills, good study skills, the ability to request and receive assistance. So how do I ask for help and when do I ask for help? Their prior skills and knowledge, realistic self-expectations, what I think of my own achievements within this course, and then of course that aspiration building stuff, that stuff around where is it that I'm heading once I complete this course, and how is that journey, how is this course taking me on that journey? And probably of no surprise as well, and we hear about this commonly within the education sector, probably more predominantly in primary and secondary ed, and that is having a good relationship with my teacher and my classmates. And as I mentioned earlier, that social aspect that our students were identifying as being pertinent to their study, that how they engage socially in the classroom with their classmates and with their teacher as well. So we flipped that around. Rather than looking at, you know, all the things that are going to make a student fail, we started looking at all the things that were going to make a student succeed, and that come particularly from this with withdrawals by semester. Moving on to the next one, which was attrition according to qualification level. So you can see there the bars in the blue are our enrolments. That's where our students are enrolled across Certificate 1 through to Advanced Diploma courses. The line you can see above those bars is where our attrition is happening. And this is particularly where we need to look at our apprentices. So you can see that for Wodonga TAFE in Certificate 3 level courses, our apprentices make up just over 30, just below 80% of our entire enrolments, which is a huge chunk of our enrolments. You can also see that our attrition rate in Certificate 3 level courses is the highest of any course. So this was a real indication for us to put a need on focus on apprentices and trainees, and we made some specific recommendations about retaining apprentices and trainees. So you heard me talk before about the student life cycle and what happens after a student makes an inquiry with our institute. If we looked at that life cycle, and the life cycle for an apprentice is listed within the research, I haven't included it in today's presentation because it is fairly complex, but if we look at that life cycle from the perspective of an apprentice or trainee, it's complex, it's vastly different to that of a normal student enrolling into a course here with Wodonga TAFE, and it involves a number of other players, like the employee, like the apprenticeship centre, like sometimes an apprenticeship support officer. There's a whole number of people that are engaged with that student, often prior to them even stepping foot into one of our classrooms here as an apprentice or trainee. Now, we know from data time and time again that first year apprentices are a huge risk of dropping out of their apprenticeship, and so as I mentioned, the research had a particular focus on and a section on the challenges of retaining apprentices and the need for some more research, some more in-depth research to be done on how to properly engage and retain apprentices. So there is some in-depth info in there, but there's certainly the need for some further research around that area. This data also, similarly, as I mentioned before, Certificate 4 level students, you can see that they make up the majority of our enrolments here. Whilst the withdrawal rate of them drops down, what we did find, and is not shown on this graph, that the likelihood of unit failure at Certificate 4 level was through the roof, and we know that unit failure is linked to, or can be linked to, risk of early exit. So we've got a particular focus on our Cert 4 students as well, based on the fact that they were the most likely of our cohort to fail a unit. Our young people are mostly engaged in Certificate 1 and Certificate 2 level courses. As I mentioned earlier, also much higher risk of early exit. The diploma level withdrawals there, you can see that it's well up above the bar. Those withdrawals were happening very, very early into the course rather than late in the semester, and often it was a mismatch in terms of this isn't actually what I thought, this doesn't meet my expectations, and often those students did move into other courses. So that was sort of reassuring that whilst it looks fairly hefty on paper there, that often it was just an early withdrawal and a move to another course, often a lower level course. And finally, the final graph that I'll show you that we thought was quite interesting was the exit according to VTG eligibility. So back in 2015, in the blue there, in the blue bars, you can see that we had a fairly even split of fee-for-service students, which are the ones on our left in the blue, and our VTG students. So our fee-for-service students enrolments made up just under 50%. Our VTG enrolments made up just over 50% of our total enrolments here at Wodonga TAFE. In the green, you can see the withdrawals. So these are how our withdrawals were split. So again, fee-for-service students were bang on 40% of our withdrawals. Our VTG students were sitting at 60% of our withdrawals. Now, the reason that this was quite a surprising statistic for us was because we assumed wrongly that our fee-for-service withdrawals would have been significantly lower than our VTG withdrawals, and that's based on the fact that a student is paying full fee for a course. So one would assume that they are less likely to exit early from that course. That wasn't the case at all, really, and we were quite surprised by this statistic. So VTG eligibility, or the price that a student is paying, had very little, only slight impact on their withdrawal or their early exit from a course. There are about 35 more graphs within the full research project that link what we were studying here and to early exit. This was a picture that I loved and used throughout the entire research, and that is, yeah, sure, we've lost some, but who's counting? And the more that vocational education moves into this state of being funding being linked to completion rates and success rates, the more we're going to have to put a focus on this to retain students. It was a project that I thoroughly enjoyed doing and that I'm very proud of with the team here at Wodonga TAFE to have been a part of, and we're very happy that we're moving this into 2018 to really impact on the success of our students here at our institute.
So we've just got a couple of questions that we'll tidy up. So Malcolm, I believe we've answered your question. We do have fully online programs. So one of the programs that we actually pointed Jaspersoft at was Diploma of Photography, finding that we were experiencing some level of withdrawal.
And the reason we pointed Jaspersoft at photography is because that is a purely off-campus distance course for us, and it was an interesting one to pick. And what we were looking particularly at there is an off-campus purely distance student, are they actually more likely or less likely to exit early? So that's, we picked a variety of courses strategically, I guess, to look at the engagement of a student, whether it be on campus, off campus, blended learning, distance learning, to really get a picture of who was engaging and how they were engaging.
So we've got a question, sorry, I've just, from Joe. Does this show the withdrawals as a cumulative or comparison of semester 1 and 2? So you would have been referring to that single line?
Yeah, so they are cumulative. That is a cumulative analysis, that one there. As I said, this was just done over 1 year, so just done over 2015. Moving into the future, we plan on extending. This was an initial research project, I guess, so we're aware that the data that we collected can be improved upon in the future, and that we plan to take that to the next level. But yes, it was cumulative, yes.
So was there a first go. We're aiming to improve and get a lot more sophisticated second time round. Get a bit more smarter with the use of technology, and the data is absolutely fascinating, and there's certainly a lot of learning to do. So Sue, yes, absolutely. Now, if there's
Thank you, Dr. P. Waterhouse. We agree that the approach, looking at it from a systemic approach, from an institute perspective, I guess, was one of the things that we loved most about this project. It takes the pressure away from the teacher being responsible to engage and retain every student within every class, and we were looking at it more from a bigger picture, I guess, that it is the responsibility of the institute to engage and retain students.
Yeah. So I think in conclusion,
Jeremy, data is awesome. I'm such a nerd for it.
Lana wasn't a data girl prior to this project. It was quite surprising.
I'm that touchy-feely people person that's a social worker that hates data, but this was really, really cool to look at it from a big picture to get a really good idea of what's going on in our institute. Yeah, I believe, Sue, that the paper is...
We'll make it available to Arnaldo. Yeah. The PowerPoint, I imagine Arnaldo will make available to you as well.
Yeah, look, we'll upload that along with the video of this. Yeah, we'll probably go into. We've got a research tab, so we might create a new webinar research tab, given that this will be the first of hopefully many. So yeah, that'll happen.
Kylie, thank you for your comment there about engaging with Aboriginal learners. Again, we weren't able to go too in depth on the demographics of all the different learners that we have here and their specific needs, but that's that's something that we'd certainly love to do in the future, and I completely agree that engaging and retaining our ATSE students is high on the agenda of just about every institute, and how we could use this model with an ATSE lens, I guess, to develop those best practice principles.
Yeah, so thank you very much for all your wonderful comments on the side. We certainly thought we had fun, and we did some good stuff, I suppose. So it's very nice to get some external endorsement that you think the same way as we do, and are perhaps a bit excited about learning more as we step into stage 2 of student success and retention at Wodonga TAFE. So thank you for your time. I think we're right on 1 hour, so we'll wind it up now. We've had fun.
We've had a bunch of fun. Thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you to the VTA for facilitating and arranging this, one of the first of 5 research in TAFE webinars. It's really important, guys, that we put our hand up and say we are engaged in this type of activity.
The VTA is very happy to do this, and we look forward to more. And of course, if people have research that they'd like to showcase, they want their peers to be aware of, feel free to contact me. My details are on the VTA website, and who knows, you might be the next presenter.
Thanks, Arnaldo. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, guys. Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Justin and Alana. Thank you, Arnaldo. I'll turn off the recording.